These are all the formulas that we are going to give you for this test. Okay? So you don't have to memorize formulas. You do have to recognize what kind of quadrilateral that you're looking at or that they're talking about, or how to use each of these formulas. What does lateral area mean? What does surface area mean? What does volume mean? So again, we will give you all of this, and you will have to use this to come up with the answers. Okay? Also, this Friday we will have a skills check. The skills check will cover just these top 3 formulas. Okay? All right. So let's turn to the inside, and I'd also put on the test date, Thursday, April 30th. That is just under 3 weeks. So we will spend just under 3 weeks on this chapter. Okay? All right. So turn the page. Let's look at the first page. Areas of quadrilaterals. Does anybody know what a quadrilateral is? Please keep that away. Yes, it is a four-sided shape, four-sided figure. All right. And I do think that's kind of important to know. So a quadrilateral is a four-sided closed figure. Closed just means that all the sides are connected. Okay? So first up, and the very first formula that we are talking about is the parallelogram. All right? A parallelogram, it says, is a quadrilateral. So quad means 4. Quad means 4. With both pairs of opposite sides that are parallel. Both pairs of opposite sides are parallel. The base of a parallelogram is any side of the parallelogram. So the base can be any side. The altitude of a parallelogram is defined as the perpendicular segment between the two parallel bases. Okay? And the height of a parallelogram is the length of an altitude of the parallelogram. So the altitude here and the height, these are the same. These are the same. So this is a parallelogram. These sets of arrows right here mean that the two sets that match are parallel. So this base over here is parallel to this base. That means they would never cross if they were lines. Okay? And this side here and this side, they are also parallel. That's what makes a parallelogram. All right. And then notice this is the height. So this height right here is straight up and down from the base. It makes a 90-degree angle. That is very important when you're talking about parallelograms. So the bottom says, to find the area of a parallelogram, imagine cutting off the right triangle, blah, blah, blah. So this is why we come up with this formula. So what was over here, okay, as a parallelogram, we just take that and we move it down here. So now it looks like a rectangle. So that's why we say the area of a parallelogram, and I did this so that you would have to rewrite these. So A means area. I'm going to put PARA down here. The area of a parallelogram is equal to small b for the base times h for the height. And what you want to remember for the height is that it needs to be the perpendicular height, the straight up and down height. okay? When someone measures your height, okay, we're not going to look at height like this, like the slant, okay? Whenever your auntie or your grandmother says, oh, you're looking so tall, let's take your height, you know. They say stand up straight. So we need straight, perpendicular height. So the example down below, base times height. And if you remember, I said you could have your base as any one of those sides. First of all, I am going to expect that you start with the formula. Now, you don't have to write parallelogram, but I do want to see capital A equals small b times h. Now, you don't need to put a dot there. If you want to, you can. If you want to put the multiplication sign there, you can do that also. All right, so we are looking for the base. The base. So as you look at this picture, your base here, it's kind of a confusing picture, is going to be this from C to D. And that has a length of 23 feet. So we're saying area is the base, which is B of 23, times, now since we don't have and we're using numbers, we do need to put some sort of multiplication sign there. Either a dot or a multiplication sign or parentheses. The height, I am looking for the straight up and down height. And if you look, question? I do not want the slant height, so we don't want 25, okay? We want the straight up and down height that is right here that we could move over here and it would show to be 24 feet. So don't just put the numbers that are there. You have to find the straight up and down height. This is what I was talking about. We don't want slant height, okay? We want the straight up and down perpendicular height. So 23 times 24. You guys have the calculators. What is 23 times 24? $552. Okay. 552. Now, when we're talking about area, you have to be very specific about units. So this is feet squared. Because we are trying to figure out how many 1 by 1 foot squares would fit in that quadrilateral. So it's always feet squared or square feet, either way. Any questions about that? Base times height. Base times height. All right, let's go to the next one. At the top of the next page. Check, check. Find the area of the parallelogram. Always start with the formula. Area of a parallelogram equals base times height. See if you can write down what you think the area of this parallelogram is. What numbers would you multiply? What numbers would you multiply? What's your base? And what is your perpendicular height? Maybe it's a little too soon to do that. Okay. You might not be totally finished, but you've probably at least figured out what you thought would be your base and your height. Okay? It says that for a parallelogram, the opposite sides are parallel. The opposite sides, which I did not mention, are also congruent. So your base here, and base I usually think of as bottom, okay? Base is, I think of as bottom. If this is 21 centimeters, then this also is going to be 21 centimeters. So the base, I would say, is 21. Okay? The height, we are looking for the perpendicular height, the straight up and down height of that parallelogram to the base is going to be 15, which is right here. So 21 times 15. And what do we get when we multiply 21 times 15? Edgar? 315. And we need to label it correctly, so that would be centimeters, and the squared has the small 2 in the upper right-hand corner. Umu, please put that away. You should be working on the skills check right now, okay? Now, you're like, well, why did they even give me this other little triangle over here? Well, because if we put this over here and moved it over here, then it would look like a rectangle, and that would give you that same base times height, or length times width. Usually we say length times width. So for a rectangle, we say length times width. For a parallelogram, it's like a rectangle that's been pushed at the top. Any questions about parallelograms? Yes. Let's see. Ooh. Probably because it's in, it looks like it's in degree mode. Let's see here. Radians, normal, float, classic. Mode. If I do quit. I don't know. Oh, it's in K, thousands. How do we get that off? How do we get that off? I think there's not another one. Yeah. You either deal with this and forget about the 2 extra zeros for now. That be okay? And then give it to me before you leave, and I will see about asking another teacher. It's kind of weird. Okay. All right. So the next quadrilateral that we are talking about is called the trapezoid. Trapezoid. Okay. So this is the second one. We are not talking about squares. We are not talking about rectangles. Those are also quadrilaterals. But we had the parallelogram first. Now we have the trapezoid. Let's see here. What do I want you to know? A trapezoid is a quadrilateral with exactly 1 pair of parallel sides. So a parallelogram with the word parallel in it has 2 pairs of parallel sides. A trapezoid only has 1 pair of parallel sides. Okay? And those sides that are parallel are the bases. You have 1 base on the bottom and 1 on the top, but they're always parallel to each other. They will never touch. Okay? The height of the trapezoid, again, is going to be perpendicular. So I could move this height over this way, and it's going to be the straight up height, not the slant height. It's going to be that straight up height. All right? And so the area A of a trapezoid is 1/2 of the product of the height and the sum of its bases. So they have it written down here really small, but I was like, that is way too small. So here we are going to rewrite it. The area, capital A, of a trap. So I put the trap down underneath a little bit and to the lower right is 1/2 times the height times the sum of the bases. Sum means I'm going to add both of those bases. So that's base 1 plus base sub 2. Now, remember, the height has to be a straight up perpendicular height. Okay? And the bases you have to add together first. We're not going to be distributing with those bases most of the time. That is a trapezoid. Okay? All right, let's turn to the next page. And let's find the area of these trapezoids. Start with the formula. Now, on the skills check on Friday, you are going to get area equals base times height. You're going to get area equals 1/2 times the height times the sum of the bases. And you're going to get area equals 1/2 d sub 1 times d sub 2. We are not going to tell you which formula goes with which shape. You need to get to know that on your own. So just to kind of reinforce it, the first one is the parallelogram. The second one is the trapezoid. And we will get to this one maybe on Wednesday. So we're going to focus, I think, on parallelogram and trapezoids for a bit. All right, so here we go. This is a trapezoid. It has one pair of parallel bases. All right, start with the formula. The area of a trapezoid is equal to 1/2 times the height times the sum of the bases. So that should always be your first line. Your second line should be where you substitute the values in. Angel, you with me? First line formula. Second line is where you substitute the values in and say 1/2 times what is your perpendicular height? It is 3. See this little box here? That means it is perpendicular to the base. So that is 1/2 of 3 times the sum of the bases. I don't want that color, I want green. So base 1, it does not usually matter which base you take first or last, but I don't know. I guess we'll make the top one always base 1 just to be consistent. And then the bottom one will be base 2. So base 1 in parentheses is 5 plus base 2 is 9. And then you can take all of this on your calculator. Now, what is another way to write the fraction 1/2 as a decimal form? What is 1/2 in decimal form? Does anybody know? 0.5. So on the calculator, you would take 0.5 times 3. And then you would need to put this in parentheses if you really don't want to do any math in your head. So you would put parentheses 5 plus 9 and parentheses, and then hit enter. And what do you get for an answer? Yes, 21. Now this is area. Anytime you're talking about area, it's going to be in whatever units they have, centimeters, and then squared, a little 2 in the upper right-hand corner. Any question about how I got those numbers? Question? Got a question? Now, for those of you that don't want to always rely on the calculator, let me give you a hint. Multiplication, and if you're not strong in math, you don't have to listen to this. You don't have to, it might not be for you. But if you are stronger in math, multiplication, which we are multiplying 1/2 times this amount times this amount. We're multiplying all of those, not what's inside though. Multiplication is commutative. You can change the order. So if I said 4 times 5 times 6, I could take 5 times 6 times 4 and get the same answer. When you take half of 5 plus 9, that's 14. Half of 14 is 7, and 7 times 3 is 21. So I'm just saying you can do some of this mentally if you feel confident to do that. Okay? So half of some number, especially if your number is even, it makes it easier. If all you have is half of 2 odd numbers, it's not as easy. But half of 5 plus 9, which is 14, half of 14 is 7. 7 times 3 is 21. All right, let's go to the second one. So this is a trapezoid. Here I have one base here that is parallel to this base. These two other sides are not parallel. If those lines or those sides extended up, they would cross. So this is a trapezoid. And we put capital A with the far small lower right-hand course of a trap is 1/2 times the height times parentheses b sub 1 plus b sub 2. So A area is, and if you want, and you're going to do it on the calculator, you can change 1/2 to 0.5 right away. Height. What is my perpendicular height? 4. Yes. So this is the height. We don't want slant height. We don't want this slant height. They're giving you those sides just because those are the lengths of those sides. But don't mistake that for the straight up and down height. So 0.5 times 4, and then base sub 1. Let's call the top one base sub 1. That's parentheses 6 plus base sub 2 is 8. So in your calculators, if you put that in, be very careful. 0.5 times 4 times parentheses 6 plus 8 and parentheses. If you're doing it in your head, 6 plus 8. You do what's in parentheses first. That's 14. Half of 14 is 7. 7 times 4 should be 28. And there are no units here. Does that mean you get off from putting something? No. You should put units and then squared, the little 2 in the upper right-hand corner. Because you're talking about area. You're talking about how much space on a flat space is enclosed by these 4-sided figures. All right. Okay. Hey, One day down in our 3 weeks of quadrilateral, surface area, and volume. Homework. Homework number 1. You have the packet. There are 3 homework assignments. This is going to be due on, it's either Thursday or Friday. I can't remember. Oh, it says due Friday. Remember, Friday we also have a skills check on these first 3 different types of formulas. Area of a parallelogram, area of a trapezoid, and we'll eventually get to area of rhombus and kite. Okay, all right, good job. Let's see what